and welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast from Doof Media. My name is Heather, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Heather. How's it going today, Heather?
It's pretty good, Heather. Not plotting to take over from you, just content in my place as the less important
green,
Heather.
The green one.
The green Heather.
Or the blue one. My son will really enjoy the color coding of this movie. This week on the show, it is time once again for an episode of the Doof Canon, the mostly monthly series where we look at some new movies that are voted on by our patrons. Matt, why don't you talk to us about how this whole thing works?
Yeah, once a month, those folks over on Patreon who donate to us on the Council of Doof level get to collectively decide on a movie for the community to vote on, which will then be talked about by me and Scott, and then y'all get to decide whether it gets in the canon.
You went rogue. I don't know what to do.
I'm in a silly mood.
Burgundy the script.
We're off script today, Scott. I guess it was just the rebellious nature of Christian Slater that's infected me for this conversation.
Of course. Yeah, so as Matt said, we leave the final decision up to you folks at home. There will be a link in the show notes of this episode, which will take you over to our Patreon page, patreon.com/doofmedia. And there you will find a poll on whether or not you think this movie is worthy of entrance into the canon. You do not have to be a patron to vote. You can be a non-patron and you can click that radio button just like anyone else can. Speaking of the movie, though, Matt, what film has our council brought for us this month?
This month, our council has nominated the 1989 high school dark comedy classic, Heathers.
Does it not bother you that everybody in this school thinks that you're a piranha? Like I give a shit. They all want me as a friend or a fuck.
What is Heathers all about?
At Westbury High, where cliques rule, jocks dominate, and all the popular girls are named Heather, it's going to take a Veronica and mysterious new kid to give teen angst a body count.
This movie was written by Daniel Waters and directed by Michael Lehman. It stars Winona Ryder, Christian Slater, and Shannon Doherty. Matt, I have to know, you've never seen this film before, right? This was a new experience for you?
I had never seen it. I was really surprised by the content, I guess. I didn't even know it was like a dark, like murder comedy film. I'm partial to these. I like this kind of movie.
So yeah, what did you think of Heathers?
I thought it was pretty fun. I was surprised. I guess one thing that I'll say is it made some things click for me, because I was like, oh, this is maybe not the progenitor, but this is like a very important movie in terms of, I think, setting some tropes for some later kind of dark horror comedy type movies. At least that was my feeling. I mean, maybe there were other things that were more trope setting, but like as I was watching this, I was like, oh, that's probably where this whole sort of tone came from, because it's got this great, it's got this really unique tone, unique tone. Like that's probably the thing that I'm going to take away from it overall. More so than the plot necessarily, is just like a sort of tongue-in-cheek darkness, and she's not literally talking to the camera usually, but she's writing to the camera. It's this I don't have quite the right words for it. Maybe we can find them over the course of this conversation, but that was the thing that really jumped out to me about the movie.
Sure. Yeah. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to talking to you about it. I adore this movie. I don't even remember the first time I saw it, but I was kind of completely enthralled by it. It does have this very kind of almost magical, unreal tone to it. Like there's, especially the way the movie's shot. It feels very dreamlike and soap opera-y in a lot of ways. And then that in contrast with the dark things that are happening in it, I think makes this beautiful movie. And I think nothing kind of tells what the tone and the weirdness of this movie is going to be quite like the first 30 seconds of it, where you meet these three girls, these three Heathers. They're playing croquet in this like beautifully pristine backyard. Then they walk on some flowers, and then they hit some croquet balls, and we cut to Winona Ryder's head in the ground, being smacked in the head with croquet balls, and that's not something that actually happened ever in the movie, right?
Yeah.
Like that's just kind of a dreamlike thing of capturing how this whole thing makes her feel. But it like I don't want to go so far as to say this is a magical realism film because it's not really, but like it has that feeling to it a lot of times.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think you could even, I don't know if there's any rules here. You could call it, like I was thinking about the idea that like the mantle of the basically cheerleader Heather squad leader keeps passing between people
Mm-hmm.
as people die, and in an almost magical way. And and also, I mean, there was some stuff that kind of reminded me almost of a Tim Burton-esque tone where, and maybe,
Sure.
I don't think I'm just saying that because of Winona Ryder. I think it's very much, similar themes to ones that Tim Burton often tackles that have to do with like young people who are not understood. Just in general, he loves people who are not understood, people who are outcasts. And Winona Ryder's character is kind of a perfect Tim Burton protagonist in that way. And then like
Yeah.
the way in which the parents are almost these like robotic, repetitive, uh, boring people. These like almost not even real people, caricatures. Um, I guess it gives them a few flashes of humanity. Which are
Sort
which is
of, yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think you could very easily draw a line between Edward Scissorhands and this film from
Mhm.
a look and a feel kind of angle. I mean, I think this is obviously a much darker film. It's a much angstier film, and I mean, it's really interesting because I feel like every generation has their like defining high school teen film, and this to me very much feels like a response to the John Hughes 80s high school films, right? These
Uh-huh.
kind of like, yeah, everyone, it all works out in the end, and
Yeah.
and the Breakfast Club, we figured each other out and we've solved all our problems, and I feel like this is a movie in response to that in a lot of ways, where it's like, no, actually, it's really hard being a teenager. It's like the thing I love about this movie is it pokes fun at teenagers and their absurdity, but also it really does seem to have a really acute understanding of what it's like to be a teen, especially in this time period that the movie takes place in. Like
Yeah.
just the idea of like the serious idea that like teen suicide is like a big problem. Like
Uh-huh.
it's I think that I looked this up today because I was curious. It's the second leading cause of death amongst young people is suicide. The first being uh, gun violence. By the way.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And it is a real serious problem, and it's not as if the movie doesn't treat it as a real serious problem. What it treats is everyone's response to it as absurd and not actually ever addressing the problem at hand.
Yeah. It's treated as a thing that people treat as theater.
Yeah,
They
and
are.
not just the parents too, right?
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, the parents don't understand and we kids are bonding over the fact that no one gets us. It's the kids are as guilty as this as anyone.
Yeah. I mean, I actually remember this basically being how it was when I was in school. Thankfully, nobody I ever knew committed suicide in school.
Hmm.
But when somebody in the school would commit suicide, which I guess happened at least once that I can remember, then it was basically an item of gossip. Like there's just, when you're young, you don't really understand the gravity of these things, and like I don't know,
Yeah.
empathy as a teenager is a weird thing because it's not like you don't have empathy, but you're so consumed, sucked into your own navel that
Hmm.
it's hard to properly understand the struggles of other people. And also, I think to be more fair, less jokey about it, like there, like you just said, there is a lot of struggle that comes with just being that age and
Yeah.
dealing with the transition. I agree. Like I liked the way all the characters were sort of treated with uh, sufficient realism while also kind of being magical realism. Like, for example, Christian Slater's character is like, on the one hand, over the top, right? It's like he brings a gun to school and he shoots blanks at kids, and then he goes
Yeah.
around and murders people because they sort of offend him, basically. And then the movie kind of treats him as this like anti-hero. And I guess I felt myself stepping back from it and going like, okay, aside from the murdering people part, he's a very relatable character because
Yeah.
I definitely felt that way when I was in high school. I definitely felt like this sense of massive injustice and absurdity at this little pretend society that we lived in, where everyone pretended that it was real,
Yeah.
and just the grotesqueness of it offended me so deeply. And then it's like, and you can't escape from it, right? You have to go there every day, basically. And so it becomes maddening. And in that particular way, I was like, I probably would have really like resonated on some level with the Christian Slater character when I was a kid. Although obviously what the movie's doing is it's saying like, well, obviously the proper reaction to feeling that way is not to lash out, because
Yeah.
it doesn't solve any of his problems, and then he ends up dead anyway. I think the film strongly implies that it wouldn't have solved any of his problems even if he had gotten to blow up the school. Like the world still wouldn't have cared even if he had succeeded in blowing up the school.
Yeah, you do kind of feel for him in this kind of desperate attempt to be noticed and make a difference and make an impact and try to make the world a better place. Like, it is very much this kind of angry young kid, convinced that they have to make the world better, and he's obviously doing it in a way that is horrible and wrong and fucked up and murderous. But you understand the impulse is like, look at these terrible people. Wouldn't it be better if we just got rid of all those people? And what are we going to have to do to make an impact, to change things for the better? Just like this anger and this frustration with nowhere to put it, and he puts it in violence.
I like the sort of maturity with which it approaches this idea that it's not that these are all just monstrous people. It's like Winona Ryder is afraid that she could become, the queen bee. Like the power, the allure of it is so strong that it's just like it's this role that must be filled almost cosmically. And I like that because it's basically saying it's not, again, not that these people are flawed and thus deserve to die because they're evil and monstrous. It's like this is a system that has certain archetypal roles kind of built into it, and the people that get shoved into those roles are made monstrous by the roles. I thought that was interesting.
I really loved, Veronica hates all her friends, right? She hates the Heathers. She's like she's part of the clique, but then also feels outside of the clique at the same time. And then when JD pushes her on this, I think she says something to the effect of like, it's like they're my coworkers and it's my job to be popular. And that's what she thinks of it as. And I love that viewpoint on like the pressures of the social hierarchy in school and just being young in general.
Yeah.
This idea that like, I don't have to. It's not like you don't like all your coworkers, right? Of course you don't, but you don't have a choice. Like, these are the people you work with, and this is your job. Your job is to be the most popular one possible. I mean, these are like, the thing I love about this movie so much is like, these are themes and ideas that like I feel like every high school movie tackles, right? Like the idea of cliques, the idea of popularity, what it takes, what you do. Like, I think Mean Girls is like the 2000s generation version of this film in a lot of ways, although obviously very different tonally, which is like, this is such a quintessentially 80s film in my mind, because it's just really dark and pissed off. But I don't know, like it's not doing anything wholly original, but I think the way that it does it is just endlessly fascinating to me.
Yeah, and like you said a minute ago, kind of comparing it to the John Hughes movies, where there's this like sort of warmth and, I don't know, maybe it would be unfair to say simplicity to it. I like this movie leaves you with questions walking out of it. Like one thing I was thinking about is Veronica, the film sort of situates her like, okay, she's the protagonist, obviously. And in her own world, she's like pretty much all young people, and maybe most people in general, thinks of herself as the center of the universe, and she's put upon. She's the one that everything is happening to, and like you just said, for example, she talks about the other members of her clique being like her coworkers, and she doesn't even like them. But she goes along with everything that they want to do.
Yep.
And you can easily imagine, I'm not saying the film says this, but you can easily imagine that all of the Heathers feel the same exact way. And to them, Veronica is this horrible person who is happy to go along with all these terrible things. And she is equally culpable. You could even say more culpable, because she has like the self-awareness to know that what they're doing is hurtful, but then does it anyway. Like one of the first things that happens in the movie is she participates in the handwriting forgery thing to hurt someone who she actually liked and thought of as a friend.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, she almost becomes worse because she's convinced herself that she is better than this, and aside from this and apart from this, it's like, because I know this is wrong, I'm not as bad as the others, even though
Right.
she's actually the key player in this. She's the only one that can forge signatures. Like they couldn't have done that without her, and yet she feels like they're terrible, and she's better than them. And that kind of continues throughout everything. You know, she's killing these people. I love the way in which the movie depicts these early deaths is like her desperately trying to remove culpability from her, right? Like JD pours the poison in the thing. She grabs the one with the poison in it. Yeah, she's kissing him at the time and not looking where her hand's going. But like also, she knows that the one she poured the milk and the orange juice into was not covered. The one with the poison is clearly has a lid on it.
Right.
And so like there's part of you that's like, she did this on purpose. She knew. And like the thing I really paid attention to this time was the second Heather falls over and dies in that, you know, beautifully shot scene where she crashes through the table. I love that so much. It's like she immediately knows what happens. Like, oh, this is the poison. It's never a moment of, oh my God, what is this? Check what's happening. She knows, because she knows she picked up the poison. And it's the same thing with the bullets, right? I think you sent me a message about his bullshit German bullets that don't go very deep and just make you bleed a little and also paralyze you. Like that's no, we're told by the movie that she has a genius IQ, right? Like she is a literal genius, and it's like, you knew that wasn't true, and JD even calls her on that, and she does it anyway. And so she's a monster through the majority of this film.
She enables she enables everyone. I'm actually honestly left wondering how I'm supposed to feel about her, because at the end it's treated as a victory that she, you know,
she saves the school, right?
She does save the school, which is like, okay, she's done being a useful idiot. She's gonna stop him from blowing up the school, and he dies. And I guess she does save the school. So she decided to stop being terrible, and then she decided to re-engage her friendship with the girl who she'd been horrible to. So like all. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
It's like that's all well and good. I was almost just like, I don't know if that's like a sufficient reckoning for all the harm that she's done, or maybe not even reckoning, maybe just like admit. I don't know. Maybe this is just one of those things where I would feel differently on a rewatch or something.
I don't know. I mean, she doesn't really face consequences for her actions, right? Like she gets away with all of them. She killed a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I mean, she saves more people, so she like gets away with it. And then there is this extending the olive branch with Martha at the end. It's like, look, I'm going to take control of this group, but I'm going to be different because I'm going to invite the outcast, overweight girl to go hang out with me. And that is supposed to symbol that like now under me, things are going to be different. But like, are they? I don't think one person being nice to one social outcast is going to fix the hierarchical class structure and just in general the issues of being a young person growing up in America.
Right.
There is also like I don't want to like get too 21st century on this movie, but like her character is like enormously privileged, right? Like her parents are just like constantly sitting on their expensive lawn with their croquet set eating pate. Like she wants for nothing. There's she like she could get into any Ivy League school she wants, and there would be money to pay for it, right? Like she's an extremely privileged person. And every character kind of is like, even JD, who plays like the the loner outcast that I think in a different movie would be like a poor character, like, you know, like to represent a different type of person. His dad like owns a huge construction business, and he's clearly very rich. We see his house too, so everyone's super privileged in this movie.
Yeah, that it was funny because I was thinking about this friend I had in middle school who dressed exactly the way JD dresses, and eventually went over to his house, and he had like the biggest mansion I've ever seen at the time, anyway. So that's just a pattern. Yeah, I mean I think that I don't think you're overly 21st centuryifying it, because I think that the movie does textually address this very briefly, albeit in the moment when I don't remember the exact interaction. She's complaining to her mom about something, about, I don't know, the way she's been treated, the way teenagers are treated. And her mom gives like probably the one time in the movie where it's just a straightforward closest thing to the author tipping his head into the frame and saying, adults basically says teenagers are always complaining about not being taken seriously and not being treated like adults, but then they seem to complain the loudest when they actually are being treated like adults. And
Yeah,
you know, basically, yeah, life is a river of shit, deal with it sort of attitude.
I found it as I was looking. When teenagers complain that they want to be treated like human beings, it's usually because they are being treated like human beings.
Yeah,
that's a perfect quote, right? Like,
yeah, I love that.
It is ingrained in like the essential like selfishness of being a teenager. And yeah, I man, I all the stuff is super fascinating, and I love the movie really getting into it. I do want to not lose the trees for the forest a little bit here. Be like, this is also a really funny movie.
Yeah,
Like it is legitimately really funny. Like it's doing all these, I think, very clever and very fascinating things that I think cement it as a classic, but it's just fun to watch as well. Obviously this movie uses like words and stuff that we can't use anymore, but the scene with the mineral water
yeah,
was just hilarious. Like
yeah,
the just like the perfect construction of a joke where, you know, he's got this bag of gay paraphernalia, and it includes one gay porno magazine and then a bunch of random stuff including mineral water. And then when the cops find the dead bodies of the two men, he grabs the bag and pulls something out, and you're like, oh, surely it's going to be the porno mag. But no, it's the mineral water.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh my god, they were,
Yeah.
I'm not going to say the word,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's just like, I don't want to explain why jokes are funny, even though I kind of just did, but like I just find it like a remarkably fun movie to watch, on top of all the other really, really fascinating and interesting things it's saying and exploring about teen life in the 80s.
Yeah, I really love dark comedy. It's hard to do because you end up, very often it can just be dark, right? And you're not actually laughing, like you're kind of aware, like, oh, this is supposed to be humorous, but like it's more almost just like shock humor, whereas this was like, no, these are actual jokes. Like this isn't as funny as the mineral water one, but I really like the college guy hitting on her and going, oh no, it's so great, I don't have to start this conversation by asking you what your major is. So like, if you came here, like, what do you think you would study? it's like, so I think that what's funny about that as a joke is that it's just like, it's funny because it's true, you know, like people don't know how to, well, whatever. It is a very funny movie. I agree. It's and it had me invested. Overall, I don't know what I thought this movie was, or I guess I just hadn't. I know I'd heard the name of it. I know that there was like honestly, I probably just thought it was like one of these women, like movies about old women having an adventure together, sort of things.
What?
You know that whole genre of movies?
I do, but it's just, wow. That's fascinating.
I think it's literally just, I knew nothing about it other than the name. And when you hear the name Heathers, that's just like the image that popped in my head. I never even saw like a poster for it. So there you have it, folks.
No, that's That's really fascinating. No, I mean, I like what you said about like, I think dark comedies have to thread this really interesting needle where like, I think it has to be funny and can't get too dark, but it also can't get too funny. I
Uh-huh.
don't know. It's like uh, one of the things I definitely wanted to talk to you about, and I know you haven't seen it, but they rebooted this show in 2018 into like a 10-part series. Um, and it was awful. Like I only saw the first episode. I think they like released the first episode early on Paramount, and then like a school shooting happened, and so they delayed the release of it until way later in that year. And then I think like by then no one cared because everyone had seen the first episode and it was dreadfully awful. And it was this thing where like it seemed like they were rather cynically like just picking up this concept and like dropping it into the mid 2010s school politics. And like the big selling point was like, I think, oh, schools are different now, and this time the main Heather is fat, and like that was like the joke, I guess.
Uh-huh.
And it's just so like weird and confusing, and like completely, in my opinion, completely misunderstands what it is that the movie's doing. And it was just awful, and it was like it continually go for the stupid ridiculous joke, or the offensive joke. Like the thing about this movie is I don't know if this movie's actually like, I would not call this movie offensive. I think there are jokes in it that are like, today's standards say things and that we wouldn't say, but like the jokes are always at the expense of the absurdity of the system
Yeah.
and
Well,
like
yeah.
and the people, like the like the like the there's an overweight girl in this story that is brutally made fun of and treated terribly, and the jokes are never at her expense ever.
Yeah.
Like the movie treats her very much like a person, and you really feel for her. And I think that was totally lost in the new one. So like I think this is really hard to do, actually.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like they didn't really have a mature. They didn't have a thing they wanted to say. This movie has a thing it wants to say. It's very clear.
Yeah.
Almost to the point of being explicit and having characters espouse the views of the movie and say them at you. And then it sounds like it was just picked up as a hey, let's make a funny high school comedy movie and show and be really funny.
Yeah. I mean, like on paper, it's like this really interesting idea of like, let's take this extremely 80s high school movie that talks about the teenage condition, and let's modernize it and talk about the modern teenage condition. And like, I think on paper that sounds like a good idea, and I wouldn't even be opposed to like them trying again, but what they made was just not it. It was just really, really bad. um I guess that's a good question I have for you, and maybe we're the exact wrong people to be answering this question, because as you talked about last week, it has been 20 years since we've been in high school. Um, do you think like if you just picked this movie up and dropped it in 2023, would it work? Like, would it relate to the kids? Like, is high school today like this depiction of high school in this movie? Or maybe even a better question is, what was high school ever like the what is depicted in this movie?
Well, I can't really say whether it was okay. There's a lot there, and I
Sure.
think that's a really interesting set of questions. Number one, I wanted to say I'm so old that my children are close to entering high school. So then I will have some insight again, and I'll be able to answer your question. Plus, I've been randomly, I guess I just see random tweets, and I was seeing the other day that like the kids these days, the Zoomers, they don't go to parties and they don't have sex
Mm-hmm.
in extremely low numbers relative to our cohort. And my impression was that our cohort, in terms of going to parties and having sex, was already hugely diminished relative to the sort of culture that you see portrayed in 80s movies, which was a whole generation prior to us. Or depends on how you use generation. I don't know, 10, 20 years prior to us. So in terms of chunks of 20 years, I can't say if high school was ever like this, because, obviously we weren't in high school in the 80s, but
Sure.
The films of that era do seem to kind of agree that there was a certain culture and it's pretty consistent.
Yeah.
And it strikes me as being reasonable to assume that there was such a thing as like asshole jocks who would beat people up, and the popular girls who were pretty, and that it was, I think we also know that like the idea of teachers sort of enforcing social order just was not a thing back then in a way that it became much more of, where we introduced these like really harsh anti-bullying measures when we were in school. Like if you got in a fight, it was such a big deal. It was like a life-ruining big deal. There were just so few fights. And my perception, and like my parents tell me stories about how like my dad was like, he doesn't even know how many fights he got in when he was younger. It was just a thing that people did. And so I kind of jumped around between the different things you asked, but I do think that it's probably wildly different now to be in high school. I think it was even very different when we were in high school. And I think there is a chance that it probably did really look like this at some point.
Yeah, I mean, possibly. I almost kind of wonder if it matters that like if this is a real depiction of what high school was like or not, because I think you're right. It is a depiction of what people thought high school was like, and so it allows you to critique and comment on the teenage culture, which is reflecting what it's seeing in this stuff. I mean, I think a perfect example of this actually is in this movie. They go cow tipping. Cow tipping is not a thing. It's not a real thing. You can't push a cow over. Like, I mean, like 10 people could maybe get together and push a cow over, but also the cow would just move, because cows don't really sleep standing up that much. Cows lay down all the time, actually. And it's just like cow tipping is a thing that's just become this culturally understood thing through pop culture, right? Like through all these movies and things talking about using cow tipping as like the perfect example of people being idiots, like that they're going to go out and cow tip at night, like these freaking idiots. But it's not a real thing. And so part of me wonders if like the high school depicted in Heathers is not a real thing either, but it just, regardless of that, it allows us to critique and comment on the culture at large.
Yeah, sure. I think you're basically right. I mean, I don't know, like there definitely were like jocks and cheerleaders and nerds at my school. It's just that the sort of cliquishness wasn't quite as ridiculously I don't know. I don't even know if I go ahead. Yeah.
So I mean, in my opinion, and for context, we both went to high school from 1999 to 2003, so about 10 years after this movie came out. In my opinion, the cliques were still there in high school, but the hierarchy of the cliques was much less important to your overall existence in school. Like I guess technically there were popular people, right? Like, and it was the ones you would normally see as popular, like the jocks, probably a little bit more popular, but like I didn't feel like that mattered very much to everyone's day-to-day existence. Like I wasn't popular in high school, but I didn't like need to be or want to be, or like there wasn't like there was no situation in which the nerd table was like looking at the popular girls walk in the room and be like, oh, there they are, I wish they would talk to us. I mean, like I had crushes on the pretty girls in school, right? Like as anyone would, but I don't know, that's my experience with high school.
Yeah, it's hard for me to be objective or to have rather a universal opinion on this, because I went to a school where I was in a magnet program within a larger high school, and so they were just, all of my friends were basically nerds of some variety, and so we had, it's almost like we had our own cliques and our own status hierarchies within the nerd core, and we and whatever was going on outside of that, we didn't really care much. And I think what you're saying applies here, where it's like, yeah, we could kind of afford not to care, because I mean, I think one of the crucial things about what's portrayed in the movies like this, and what's portrayed in many other movies, and what's portrayed by Stephen King every time he writes about school, is that like the real worst part of it is that these people with all this social power, or maybe they just have a huge personality disorder, that and they're not going to get kicked out of school, because back in those days that was just much harder to do, and so they just endlessly, mercilessly prey on everyone around them and make their lives miserable. Like whether it be the jock who, you know, just pantses people in the hallway and laughs at them, or like the more of the psycho bully sort of archetype where they're like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, extorting you for money so that they can buy drugs, which is, you know, another, you know, 80s movie archetype, or like the, you know, the popular girl who's going to, you know, ruin your social life just for kicks.
Yeah.
These are all the things where, all, like you said, the relative power of these things seem to go away. So I was never afraid
Yeah.
of the popular people in that way.
Yeah, that's true. And I think one thing we should say is, obviously we're both men talking about this, and I think the majority of the things going on in this story is very focused on the female experience, right? And that could be hierarchically, and like there could be a girl at my school who, you know, went through my class same time I did. They could have had a completely different experience. It would say, oh no, there totally was a hierarchy, and we faced immense amount of pressure to try to be as cool, as popular as possible. I don't know. That was not my experience, but yeah, I mean, I do think it's interesting that like this specific kind of like the female experience in school seems like something that we come back to. Like I already talked about Mean Girls, which I think is the closest thing to a 2000s remake of Heathers, honestly, but with a different tone. But like the idea of examining the school, the idea of having a popular clique of girls, and that whole thing exists in that movie as well. Um, but I don't know. It's really fascinating watching these and thinking of these films as like a specific reflection of the time that they were made in.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, the thing I'm most curious about is if you grab a random high schooler, like a random junior in high school right now, sit them down in front of this movie and say, watch this and tell me what you think about it. I wonder how much of it they will relate to, or will not relate to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Probably even kind of varies. I don't know. Yeah, that's a good question. I definitely, you know, it's going to become relevant to you and I at some point in the near future, how modern high schools actually operate and cease to be an academic concern. But it does seem like it's very different now. I've
Mhm.
been surprised by, God, like things that just, you know, we talked about this before. Like when you and I were kids, we could run around outside. Like my mom sometimes didn't know where I was. That not only have I never let my kids do that, it would be a crime now.
Uh-huh.
No one does that now.
Yeah.
Um, no one in my neighborhood lets their kids run around like completely laissez-faire. So like that sort of force has covered everything about parenting, and I don't know how that's going to look, because like when I was in high school, like I'd go over to a friend's house, maybe spend the night. Who cares? I'd have friends come over. Like, is that gone? I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
asking, because that was important. It was important to be able to have that kind of friendship when I was in high school.
Yeah. I guess you'll find out pretty soon.
Yeah, I guess so.
My only context on this is I watched a TikTok the other day where two high school students told their parents that they were spending the night at each other's house, and then they flew to Italy instead. And the TikTok is just their mother screaming at them at the top of their lungs. You went to Italy? What the fuck is that?
Uh-huh.
So that's my only context for this. No, and I guess the reason I'm talking about this is not just out of curiosity, but also because, you know, I think we both really, really like this movie, but we're also trying to assess, like, should this be in the canon of greatest films of all time? And I think one important factor of that is this a perfect relic of its time specifically, or is this a timeless film that will relate to generations to come? You know, like is this a movie that's going to work on teens in 10 years and 20 years and 30 years and 40 years and 50 years? And that's the thing I'm most curious about. And I wish I could be equipped to have an answer. I will say that despite not having this experience in school, obviously there is something that feels infinitely relatable, at least broadly, about the experience of being a teenager that I think
Yeah,
probably will never go away.
I totally agree with that. I'll say that the universal thing to me that I strongly resonated with was the feeling of isolation and alienation, and
Yeah.
like you're in a culture you don't like, don't understand, but you're stuck in it anyway, and you can't leave, and it sucks. And uh, that all resonated to me, even though it wasn't really the same exact culture that I experienced.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I do think it captures something universal there, at least.
Yeah, yeah, and I love it for it. I really do. And I love all these characters. Like we haven't talked about the performances very much. I think Winona Ryder is just really great in this movie. I think you compared it to her Tim Burton stuff, and it shows that like she was the perfect casting for this. I think.
Uh-huh.
I was reading beforehand that someone else was originally supposed to be Jennifer Connelly was originally supposed to be the Winona Ryder character, but she ended up turning it down. And I think that's the right move. Like I love Jennifer Connelly, she's great, but I feel like Winona Ryder has like this kind of perfect manic energy to her performance.
Yeah.
Like she's like you can tell that she's definitely one of the cool, calm, collected people, but also you totally believe when she kind of starts to lose it a little bit. I think she
Yeah.
captures that perfectly.
I,
That I don't know if
yeah.
Jennifer Connelly could do a similar thing.
Yeah, I can't think of any movies where she has like. So I mean, think of Winona Ryder. Okay, like several things come to mind. Stranger Things, much
Yeah,
older Winona Ryder,
yeah,
being entertainingly batshit
yeah, yeah.
is the thing she's always been good at,
Hmm.
and that works really well. Whereas I literally just Googled um, Jennifer Connelly comedies, and I haven't seen any of these, so they're
There's
probably not very good.
yeah. I'm trying to remember. I haven't Googled this, but I'm trying to remember off the top of my head what comedies she's even been in.
Because it's important to have that manic edge, and it's also important to be able to do comedy, because comedy is its
Yeah.
own sort of skill,
Hmm.
So
Also, apparently Brad Pitt auditioned for the role of JD, and they
interesting.
they turned him down because they thought he was too nice.
Uh-huh.
He needed an edge to him. And like speaking of which, like Christian Slater is just like this feels like the Christian Slater role to me. Like this is just exactly what he does well in this
Yeah.
this role. Like
Yeah.
he's cool, but also he's a little crazy.
Yeah. Exactly. I agree. It's the perfect. Is the right word, right? Because it's like very early in his career, fundamentally captures all of the stuff that he's good at,
Hmm.
and I like, despite the fact that I only just saw this movie, I think this is now maybe my favorite performance of his.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, it's
I
really
agree.
it is good. I mean, um I love the performance whenever he's sort of manipulating her, because it's you can see what's going on in his mind, as he's like, he wants her to do it willingly, but he's satisfied with getting her to do it semi willingly, with partial awareness.
Hmm.
I don't know. It's just like you can see all this complexity going on with him, and it's really cool.
Totally. Yeah. Great performance. Loved him. Shannon Doherty, man, I don't know how I feel about her. I obviously know her, but it's not that she's bad in this movie. I'm trying to think of how I feel about her career in general. I was never a 90210 person, so I didn't watch her there.
Yeah, I don't have any opinions.
I feel like to me, Shannon Doherty, because of when I grew up, is literally like Charmed, that witch show. Like I
Yeah,
knew she was in stuff before it, and I've seen some of it, but like she was the character from Charmed.
yeah. She's never made much of an impression with me.
I did feel like her character is really interesting though, because it seems like she's the one that is like the most insulted and controlled by Heather, right? Like,
Yeah,
she has an eating disorder. We see at the beginning of the movie, and then like we see up upon Heather Chandler's death, is she's like, "Fuck it, I don't care about that anymore," and she's eating. Um, and then, of course, from there we move to her, basically completely falling into that role. Like the the wounded victim like just becomes the torturer. It's really fascinating watching that happen, and it's pretty, I think, cruelly accurate depiction of how these hierarchy incentives work.
Yeah, I agree. I thought that's the thing, is the movie's actually really smart, on top of, being funny and all those other things we talked about.
Mm-hmm. It's great. It's a great movie. I think it says a lot of really super interesting stuff. Do you have anything else you have to say about Heathers? I feel like I'm trying to remember, Matt. Like, have we put any more high school films in the canon? Like, is this the first like high school quote unquote film we've really talked about for the canon?
There's no way to know.
No, there is, because I made a list.
Oh,
I don't remember where I put that though.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know where that list is either, Scott. So I'm glad you made the list, though. Good job.
I swear to God, this list exists somewhere. I did it.
I definitely don't remember talking about a high school movie for the Doof Canon before. And when it comes to whether are we going to do our personal votes on whether it goes in the canon?
Let's go for it.
This is not an easy one for me, because I while I really enjoyed it and I thought it was really good, I'm like, does this go in the capsule that gets buried and then found 10,000 years later, and they're like, these were the movies that represented their culture? I guess I lean toward yes. I will say it's not a strong yes. It's more of it's a good movie. It's an interesting movie. I'm glad I watched it. But it's just not on the order of what I tend to think of as a canon movie.
Okay.
What do you think?
I think for me, it's an easy yes. I really love this movie. I really feel like this movie captures something timeless and unique, while also being extremely specific to a certain moment in time. I think the direction is fantastic. We talked about the tone and the dreaminess of it. I love that of it. It feels like you're watching something different. Like even the movies we talked about, Mean Girls, and even the modern day retelling of this thing in 2018, like just it couldn't capture the otherworldly magical realism nature of a lot of this stuff. It's really unique in that. I think the only other film that I think got close to that was the one New Zealand film that we talked about the two girls. What was the name of that movie? Heavenly Creatures. Yes.
Yeah.
That movie to me like felt similar in the way it was shot to this movie. In that like dreamlike, otherworldly, like the lighting's really soft, like the way they shoot it. I don't know, like those movies feel very similar to me in that regard. I mean, they're about different things, obviously, but still about children and the social pressures and stuff like that. So, I love high school movies. I don't know if you've ever had this conversation. Like, I'm endlessly fascinated by these films. I really, really like them. And this is one of my favorite for sure. So, yes, absolutely. I do think there is space for like the John Hughes type that this movie is clearly commenting on. Like, I think there's space for those type of films as well.
Sure.
But man, I really, really like this one.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, great.
So you're a no.
Wait, I was a very lukewarm yes, actually.
Oh, okay.
I actually I may have changed my mind to no over the course of talking. So maybe it was more like I was like 55% yes, and then as I talked, I felt myself going more toward like 45% yes, which I then realized after I finished speaking was more like a no. So I guess I am a no. I think I am a no. Yeah.
Okay. Matt is a no and wrong. I'm only playing this up, Matt, because we like never disagree on this, like ever. Yeah. Like this never happens. So this is the most exciting thing that's ever happened on this podcast, is you and I disagree.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't want to push you on this because I don't want you to change your answer. I'm just curious, like, what is it lacking that would push it into that category?
I just think maybe what you could call impact. Like, I watched it and I was like, yeah, that was well done. Mm-hmm. And then I just went on with my day, which is not me saying this is a garbage movie that people should throw in the trash. It's literally just when I'm thinking to myself about what belongs in the canon, it's like, okay, let me make an analogy or a comparison or whatever. Like, I I can show my kids like 5 really great movies that they really love. And then if I show them one movie that they don't really love, I lose a huge amount of credit with them. And this has happened actually, because I got incautious and I showed them a few things, not even a few things. I showed them a couple things that I was like, I don't know if this is like, I don't know if they're going to be crazy about this, but it's a good movie. I enjoyed it when I was their age. And then they just didn't like it. And so the point I'm trying to make is, if you're enshrining a group of films as like the greatest or the best or whatever, you really better feel strongly that they belong there. And I just don't feel strongly that this belongs there. That's all.
Sure. So, not to speak for you, but it feels like this is a movie that a week from now, 2 weeks from now, a year from now, you probably won't be thinking about very much at all.
That sounds very fair to me. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, I think that's fair. I wonder if, had you experienced this film at a younger age, if it would have done something different for you. But no, I think that's a totally fair assessment. It's a no for you. It's a yes for me. But it is now up to you, our listeners. Go to patreon.com/doofmedia, click on yes or no, and let us know if you think Heathers is good enough to be in the canon. And if you are a patron, if you're not a patron, you can't leave a comment. But if you are a patron, leave a comment and let us know why. If you're not a patron, you can shoot us an email at doofmedia@gmail.com with that comment. I'm curious, if you're going to vote no, let's play a game of what high school teen comedy. It feels weird calling it a comedy. What high school teen film do you think would be a better fit for our canon? So it feels like there should be one of those in there for sure, at least.
Yeah, I like that idea. That's fun. Yeah.
I guess the last thing I want to say here is they did a funny thing that I'd noticed the first time is when Heather hits her glass table and breaks it. On that table is a Spark Notes for the Bell Jar, and then an article that says "The Fall of the American Teenager." So I thought that was some really great set design stuff there.
That's great. Love it.
All right, fuck me gently with a chainsaw. Let's go. On to. We didn't talk about the language in this movie, but is that like
I thought that was interesting because I was like, when was this made? This feels like Superbad sort of like over the top swearing stuff, and it's like, no, this was in the 80s. So it's not that you know, swearing in the 80s, obviously, but I was surprised at like the level and the sort of tenor of it overall.
Yeah. I mean, this feels like a chicken and egg thing to me, because not even the use of the swears, but the specificity, like having this incredibly popular, dressed, very, very formal girl named Heather saying "fuck me gently with a chainsaw" is really kind of shocking and off-putting in a lot of ways. And I wonder if, like, is this a reflection of the times, or is this one of those things that like Superbad? I don't know if teenagers. I don't know if we talked like they talked in Superbad. And like this, it's also like what is the Elliot Page now? Juno. Like the characters in Juno had a very specific way of talking, right? But that really wasn't a reflection of how people actually talk. But those movies got so popular that people started reflecting off of the movies instead. And I wonder what stuff like "fuck me gently with a chainsaw" and the way these characters specifically talk, like even JD, Christian Slater's character, has a very specific vocabulary, a specific way of speaking that is different.
Yeah, I guess I feel like me and my friends definitely swore a lot, and I still do. And we probably would have talked more like that if we were clever, but that's the thing about movies, is you can make all your characters really clever and witty at all times. But yeah, so I that's an interesting point though, that made like the art of an era actually influences the way people talk, and then we get confused about whether people talk that way because of the art or whether the art is depicting the way people talked. It's hard for us to know.
Yeah, I don't think we can, but it's a fun thing to think about for sure.
Yeah.
Doof. All right. Sorry, that was a last minute tangent. I don't know why that just popped into my head as we went to move out of the section of the show. But let's move on, Matt. We want to do one quick thing before we signed off for the week. I wanted to talk to you about the Writers Guild strike. We talked about this a few months ago when they first went on strike and what they were asking for. And we haven't really updated on that much since then because, frankly, there haven't been any updates. Neither side has really gotten together to settle on what was going on and what they want to agree to. So this strike has just continued on. But some big things happened this week, Matt, because the SAG-AFTRA group, which is the Screen Actors Guild and American Fellowship of Television and Radio, basically the two unions that bargain collectively for movies and TV actors, are on strike officially as of today. Were having their contract negotiations with the studios, and they fell through. And now we've got two very big guilds on strike in Hollywood, basically grinding everything to a halt. When the writers went on strike, okay, there's no writing that can be done, but filming for a lot of the stuff was still happening. Now you can't do that. You can't do any filming without your actors, and also any promotional stuff done by any SAG member is over. It's done. So, like, for example, Oppenheimer, the new Christopher Nolan film, premiered today, and they actually moved up the premiere time because they thought the strike was going to land at any moment, and so they wanted to get the premiere done before the strike landed, and all the actors had to go home and not do promotion anymore. So this is a pretty big deal. This is the first time since 1960 that two guilds in the entertainment industry have been striking at the same time. It allows them, pretty substantial pressure against the studios to push them to get what they want. Pretty big deal here, Matt. And Hollywood, as we know it, is kind of frozen right now.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I do wonder what the fallout of this is going to be. Just overall, right? Like on sort of on all sides. Like on the one side, a lot of people aren't going to make the money that they needed to make, and so there's going to be a retraction of the industry, I suspect. Yeah. On the other hand, I mean, like people are going to not be able to get their jobs back if if the strike lasts too long, right? Because you can kill the golden goose. And then also on the other side, I thought it was really interesting that last time we talked about the writer's strike, we talked about the idea that they're pushing to make it really difficult for the studios to utilize AI in their writing process. And I heard that the Actors Guild also is concerned about the idea of basically the likenesses of actors being sort of signed away for a pittance, and then the studio can just use AI / just general new, cutting edge modern technology, which is going to be commonplace in the next decades, to just be like, now I'm Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
And they want to keep that from happening. And so, but on both fronts, this is by no means the only thing they're fighting about, but on both fronts, they're both sort of taking this stand against this onslaught of technological tooling that sort of risks replacing their jobs. And I really don't know how that's going to play out, because typically throughout history, when people stand against the tide of technology, they do not win in the long run.
Yeah. I mean, the honest and I guess sad, if you're in the industry, truth is that these things are coming, they're going to get better, and there's really no stopping it. I do think the interesting thing with the Actors Guild part, and when people hear about actors, they're thinking of your Tom Cruises, your Tom Hankses, your big movie stars, right? But 60% of the 160,000 members of SAG-AFTRA are background players, are which commonly referred to as extras. People that are necessary people to exist and be in films, but don't have large speaking roles, if any speaking roles, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the proposal that the studio presented to SAG-AFTRA had something, and again, this is coming from the spokesperson from SAG-AFTRA. I haven't actually read the proposal, so I'm saying take this with a grain of salt, because it's coming from someone that strongly disagrees with it on principle, and he might be slightly misrepresenting. I don't know. The point is, the SAG-AFTRA is arguing that the proposal the studios put forward is that for these background actors, they would be required to sign a thing that says you come in, you get your day rate to do background work for one day, and then the studio has the right to use your likeness and you as a background player into perpetuity forever. Basically, so you would never be able to get a job with that studio ever again because they would just use an AI or computer generated likeness of you as a background player. And there's a lot of people in this industry, as we said, 60% that make their living, even if it's a smaller, living off of that kind of work. And the studio wants to completely erase that. And I agree with you generally that I don't think even the power of the strike, even if they win this year, is going to stop that from happening. But I also completely understand their their terror at it, because that's a huge deal. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's not like I'm questioning, is this a serious enough thing to strike over? It's more like when you invent the automobile, you can the horse and buggy riders can strike all they want. It's not really going to change the outcome. I don't want to be so doom and gloom, because it's like there are certain wins that they could get. There are certain meaningful wins that they could get, but
Yeah.
definitely it's complicated. It's really complicated, because we've talked a lot about, we complain often about how movies are too expensive now. And like, movies being too expensive is actually bad for the industry in a certain regard, because they if they flop, or rather if they don't make an incredibly huge amount of money, then people don't get paid, or they don't get the return that they thought they were getting, and so the money goes elsewhere, and so then there's less movies, and then people don't get hired, and there gets to be hugely distortionary effects on the economics of filmmaking.
Yeah.
And one thing technology can do is it can make films cheaper, which means you can make more different kinds of films. They don't have to make as much money. And so, you can still be a creative, you can still be an artist. It's just that the industry is going to look different. I think the industry is going to continue to morph and change. It's morphed and changed a huge amount over the last 10 years. It's going to continue to do so in unpredictable ways, and this is part of that.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think that long term, who knows what this is going to be. Short term, I don't know when this stuff gets settled. I really don't. There was actually this really weird Deadline, I think it was Deadline article that came out this week before SAG-AFTRA declared their strike. That was some anonymous sources within the studios saying that it's basically their plan to drag the strike out until October, until the writers start losing their homes and stuff. And like, I don't know, man. I'm not part of these groups. I don't understand why you'd leak that. I mean, I guess maybe it's a scare tactic, right? Like, you leak this stuff anonymously to a publisher, they'll publish it, and then you basically tell the writers without telling the writers, we're willing to wait this out for this long. Are you willing to lose your home over it? But it just also makes you look like the bad guy. Like, I don't know how that article comes out, and any normal person that perhaps doesn't really have any investment in this whole disagreement, other than they want their TV shows to come back on, reads that thing and says, "Ah, yes, the studios are the good guys and the writers are the greedy ones." It's a really weird negotiating tactic to me.
Yeah. If you do leak something like that, you want to do it with plausible deniability, which maybe it doesn't. I don't know.
Well, and yes, I think we should say the official spokesperson for the collective studio bargaining wing vehemently denied all that stuff, but
of course,
someone said it.
Right.
They printed it.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know how. I don't know how to think about all that. I hope to never be involved in having to negotiate something that complicated.
Yeah, it sounds absolutely miserable. I mean, I do think this is huge. Like, for those of us that critique and comment on this industry and the things that it produces, this is a big deal. Like, we've some stuff is saved up, but like, if this goes on for a long time, no more movies, no
Right.
more TV. It's just like it's one thing for the writer stuff to stop. This is a whole new thing. Like this is like with the Writers Guild, you have a lot of pig-headed studios that can be like, we don't need writers. We can just write it
Yeah.
ourselves or write it on the set, and we got it. And then the second or the third Transformers movies happen, but this
Uh-huh.
is you lose your on screen people. You can't do anything with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't think we're actually at the point of replacing the actors with CGI yet, but like it is funny to imagine, or I don't know, sobering to imagine perhaps that like if they try this again in 5 years, the studio could actually be like, not only do we not need the writers, but we also don't need the actors, and then we just move on into a brave new world of not having actors anymore. I don't know.
I can't help but think that would be a terrible for the industry and for the art form itself. Like I understand, like you're absolutely right that like these technologies are going to get better and better and better, and who knows what they're going to look like in 5, 10, 15 years. But like I don't know, like maybe I'm being a troglodyte, but I feel like
It,
there's something to be said for the human element of the stuff.
it would definitely be alien to the way that we think about the film industry.
Sure.
And I feel the same way you do, but I do wonder if there's like another dimension somewhere out there where if we explain to them the idea that there's this man named Tom Cruise and he's in all of these movies and everyone will go see a movie because it's Tom Cruise, they would be like, but aren't you horribly distracted by the fact that the guy who was the secret agent in the one movie is now fighting aliens in the other movie? Every film should have actors you've never seen before so that you're not distracted by that, right? And we would be like, well, that's that. No, I mean it's Tom Cruise. But you can imagine the benefit of having only fresh faces, right?
Yeah.
In the abstract, right?
Sure. I mean, it is really interesting how the fact that is and has never been a problem for the majority of people, that like our
Yeah.
brains don't care about that. Actually, it's one
Yeah.
of these weird things about movies that like no one could have ever predicted. Like even the concept of cutting, right? Like of cutting in a film, someone who had never seen it done before would probably, like, if you just explain it abstractly, they would probably be like, that will be impossible for a human being to follow because you're chopping between pieces and angles, and like we won't be able to follow that. And turns out we just do
Yeah.
really easily. No problem. And I think the same is with familiar faces in movies. Like we don't, not only do we not mind them, but we like them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. That's the funny thing is you're sort of, that's Tom Cruise. I love him, even if it's a totally new character. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
But I mean, I think this is a great point though, because we're on the eve of the Mission Impossible movie releasing wide tomorrow. Today, as you're listening to this, listeners, and one of the things that like the reason why people love those movies is not just Tom Cruise. That's a big part of it, but it's because you go and sit down to that movie knowing it's Tom Cruise flying that helicopter, or knowing it's Tom Cruise jumping across that chasm, or knowing it's Tom Cruise doing a halo jump, right? And so if we're talking 10 years from now, like CG has already become like just incredibly powerful as a tool, right? And we're kind of sort of starting to see a backlash to that generally, where we're starting to value practical effects a whole lot more. And I guess the question is, are we valuing practical effects more because the human brain can still tell what is a practical effect and what is not, and that will go away as this technology continues to improve? Or is it just because like the idea of that person really did that thing is a super important one to us?
I mean, I kind of have a highly specific third opinion about this, which is that the ability to use CGI has made directing worse, and we like the style of directing that is associated with practical effects. It's not that we like practical effects per se. Like the best example of this is that everybody loves Fury Road, rightly so.
Mm-hmm.
The thing about Fury Road is it's a mixture of practical and digital effects. You never notice the digital effects. And crucially, it's shot as if it's all practical. Where the camera is in relation to where the cars are. There's very few shots in the movie that are like, yeah, that's impossible.
Yeah.
You know, that would have been impossible to shoot. There are a couple, and they actually stick out because it's like the one where the truck like runs into the barrier and then like the steering wheel flies at the camera, and it's like, yeah, that doesn't look realistic because that's impossible.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I think that's actually I think Jurassic Park is another good example where the dinosaurs kind of look like shit if you watch the movie again, but they direct it in a way where you never mind or really even notice, and it's also a kind of directing that's more close in, frantic, keeps you invested. Whereas I've made this complaint about the new Jurassic Park movies. I've made this complaint about the new Aliens movies, where they love to just do these wide shots that show you everything that you could want to see, and in so doing, totally remove you from like the actual dramatic urgency of the scene, because you don't have the feeling that you're like right there with these people with this monster up close to them. It's like it's a lazy use of the tools is what it actually is. And so that's really what I think it is. I don't know that it's as any, it may have to do with the quality of the effect on a believability level. The practical effects often look terrible too. So so a preference for practical effects to me is just like a preference for the way that the scene is constructed on a shot composition and direction level. That's my wow. I spoke a lot longer than I expected to there, but I've actually been thinking about this for a while.
No, I mean, that's really interesting. I think I agree with you. I think that the worry for me would be, you know, I think we've said this phrase before that like limitations breed creativity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of a future state of AI in which actors are no longer necessary, writers are no longer necessary. None of this stuff is necessary. You can just click a button and your computer will generate a perfectly crafted movie or story that can be anything and do anything, and it could literally anything, right? Like, do we lose that idea of the limits of creativity, or the limits of people breeding creative stuff that wouldn't exist without it? I don't know. Like, it's such a, like, the idea of this stuff and this technology is such a foreign concept for our entire existence because it's never existed before, right? So
yeah,
who the fuck knows?
Yeah, I mean, I just to riff on that, I think that's a really interesting question, and I don't pretend to be able to answer it, but I will say, like, even though, you know, you and I have access to effectively infinite amounts of movies that we've never watched before, we will still on occasion choose to play, you know, Fiasco or Dungeons and Dragons or Weaver Dice on rare occasion, admittedly. Because these are it's what you just said about limitations. It's we're having a huge amount of fun, and the fun actually comes from the limitations of the system, and the rules of the system. And so you can imagine some future where it's almost more like a video game or like a highly interactive film, or like something we don't even have a name for yet, that leverages this all this technology we're talking about, where it changes our relationship with the experience, and it does so in kind of a rules-based way, where it reintroduces the notion of there being constraint. Because I actually totally agree that, like, I think the closest thing to a dystopia or a dystopian implementation of this would be like they attach something to your brain and they inverse solve for like the perfect movie for you.
Yeah.
And then they print it out, and then they're like, here's the perfect movie for you. And it's like, I think that could happen eventually. And it's like, is that what we really want? Like, if that existed, would I watch it? I might, I probably would watch it, but I would also want to have the option of doing this other stuff we're talking about, where it's more like, it's more human, it's more interactive, maybe stuff like that.
Yeah, man, I don't know. It's really wild. It's really interesting. I'm glad we get to kind of work through what all this means and what it's going to happen. As far as, what happens with the industry short term, I don't know. It's going to be, if this thing drags in through the end of the year, I think we're going to start running out of movies and TV shows. And I don't know what happens when that happens. So
yeah, we will see.
Yeah, we will keep y'all posted as we learn new stuff, but it's a really interesting time for sure.
Yep.
All right, Matt, that is going to do it for us this week. If you folks had any opinions on Heathers or on this whole messy SAG-AFTRA Writers Guild AI argument, you can let us know. You can reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com or over on Twitter at doofmedia. Also, make sure you vote. Make sure you vote for this poll here.
That's right. And if you're not already subscribed to the Doofcast, we encourage you to do so and ensure you never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, YouTube, Google Play, pretty much anywhere else podcasts can be found.
And if you want to support us, you can head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia, which you will already be doing because you will be voting in this poll on Heathers. And while you're there, you can pledge to us at any of the available levels. They all unlock some sort of bonus stuff, whether it be bonus episodes, allowing you to vote in polls, allowing you to help pick the movies that we're talking about right now. This is a movie that was nominated by one of our council members and then voted on by the rest of our patrons. And so if you're like, why are we talking about Heathers when we could be talking about Fast Times at Ridgemont High? You can make that happen. Head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia and join today.
That's right. Also, please consider rating and reviewing the Doofcast on Apple Podcasts. Each review helps us get more exposure and introduces new people to the content that we make here.
All right, folks. On next week's episode, we learned a very shocking, disturbing, and horrifying thing about Matt Freeman earlier this week. We learned that he has never seen the 1996 horror classic Scream. So we're going to have to fix that. So next week on the show, we will be watching and discussing Scream. Matt, I can't wait. I can't wait.
Yeah, that was the most shocked you've ever been. When I told you that.
Folks, me, speechless. Me.
It was something.
Yeah, ridiculous. So that'll be next week. We'll be talking all about Scream. We'll see you then.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.